You will be my instrument.
Who are you?
Did you hear that crowd?
The greatest temple
Rome ever built. The Colosseum. Because this is what they built.
Cases. There are victories yet still to come.
Rome has so many subjects. She must feed them.
They can eat war.
The arena turns slave.
Gladiator II, 2025. Complete analyses and explanations. The following is a comprehensive analysis and explanation of the film Gladiator II, exploring its narrative, themes, characters, production, and reception. The story begins 16 years after the events of the first film, charting a new epoch in the decaying heart of the Roman Empire. Lucius Verus Aurelius, the nephew of Commodus who idolized Maximus as a boy, now lives in self-imposed exile in Numidia, North Africa. He has built a life away from the corruption of Rome, finding peace with his wife, Erishat. This peace is violently shattered when Rome, under the despotic rule of co-emperors Caracalla and Geta, invades his adopted home. The attack, led by General Marcus Acacius, results in the death of Lucius's wife and his own enslavement, igniting a primal quest for vengeance that forms the engine of the plot. Lucius is stripped of his identity and transported to Rome in chains. There, he is purchased by Macrinus, a wealthy and powerful former slave who now operates as the empire's preeminent arms dealer and lanista, gladiator trainer. Forced into the arena, Lucius fights under the name Hanno, a deliberate erasure of his past. His singular focus becomes surviving long enough to kill General Acacius, whom he blames for his personal tragedy. His journey from a free man to an enslaved gladiator mirrors Maximus's path, but from the opposite direction. Where Maximus fell from the heights of Roman power, Lucius is conquered by it, offering a critique of imperial expansion from the perspective of the colonized. The narrative cleverly interweaves Lucius's personal saga with a complex political conspiracy simmering in Rome. Lucius's mother, Lucilla, who survived the purge of Commodus, is a key player in a senatorial plot to overthrow the tyrannical, incompetent emperors and restore the republic her father, Marcus Aurelius, dreamed of. Her co-conspirator is none other than General Acacius himself, who, disillusioned by serving corrupt masters, seeks a nobler purpose for Rome. This plot thread directly philosophically links the two films, resurrecting the central political ideal of the original. The arena becomes Lucius's brutal proving ground and his unexpected stage for reunion. During a gladiatorial spectacle, Lucilla recognizes her long-lost son, now a champion of the mob. This revelation is the film's pivotal emotional turn. Lucilla subsequently reveals to Lucius an even greater truth: that he is not the son of her late husband, but the biological son of the legendary Maximus Decimus Meridius. This revelation forces Lucius to grapple with a monumental internal conflict, caught between the legacy of a heroic father he never knew and the forged identity of a vengeful slave. The character of Macrinus, portrayed by Denzel Washington, serves as the film's most compelling and original creation. A former slave who has gained immense wealth and influence, Macrinus is a Machiavellian operator whose ambition is to control the empire that once owned him. He is not a traditional villain seeking mere chaos. He is a cold, calculating gangster who understands power intrinsically. Washington imbues the role with a lip-smacking, gloriously over-the-top charisma, making him a scene-stealing force whose schemes add a layer of intricate political manipulation to the story. General Marcus Acacius, played by Pedro Pascal, functions as the film's moral anchor and a tragic foil to Lucius. A former student of Maximus's teachings, Acacius is a genuinely honorable soldier worn down by endless wars fought for unworthy rulers. His invasion of Numidia was a military order, not a personal vendetta, and he carries the weight of its consequences. His character symbolizes the potential for Rome to be governed by honor rather than tyranny, and his evolving dynamic with Lucius, from target of hatred to reluctant ally, is central to the protagonist's growth. The corrupt emperors Caracalla and Geta are portrayed by Joseph Quinn and Fred Heckinger as petulant, grotesque man-children. Their performance style, reportedly inspired by Beavis and Butthead, leans into camp and absurdity. This choice intentionally highlights their incompetence and moral decay, framing them as products of a decadent system rather than cunning threats like Commodus. While this provides dark comedy, some analyses suggest it undercuts the palpable sense of menace that fueled the original's conflict. A major theme of the film is the exploration of legacy versus self-made identity. Lucius spends the first half of the film driven by a rage born of his experiences as Hanno, the enslaved barbarian. The knowledge of his parentage presents him with a preordained destiny, to be the son of Rome's greatest hero. His arc is about synthesizing these two selves, channeling his raw, survivor's fury into the purposeful, leadership-driven nobility he inherited. Director Ridley Scott has noted that where Maximus's journey began with nobility and descended into chaos, Lucius's begins with chaos and must ascend to nobility. The film's production was a monumental undertaking, even for a veteran like Ridley Scott. With a net budget of $210 million, it is one of his most ambitious projects. The shoot, delayed by Hollywood strikes, was remarkably completed in just 51 days. This efficiency is belied by the staggering scale on screen. Scott and his team consciously sought to top the action of the original, leading to sequences of unparalleled spectacle that prioritize cinematic showmanship over historical accuracy. The most discussed of these spectacles is a sequence where the Colosseum is flooded to stage a massive naval battle, replete with war galleys and, notoriously, sharks. This set piece exemplifies the film's commitment to blockbuster entertainment. Other arena battles see Lucius and his fellow gladiators facing not only human opponents, but also wild beasts like baboons and a rhinoceros. These sequences are masterclasses in practical and digital effects, designed to evoke awe and visceral excitement. Nostalgic callbacks to the original film are woven throughout its fabric. Lucius is shown unconsciously replicating Maximus's fighting techniques and speech patterns. Visual motifs, most prominently the recurring image of a hand brushing through fields of wheat, are directly reprised to connect Lucius's spiritual journey to that of his father. The musical score by David Jawadi also incorporates and reworks themes from Hans Zimmer's iconic original. These elements create a strong sense of déjà vu, consciously tying the two narratives together. The critical reception for Gladiator II was generally positive, but underscored by inevitable comparisons to its predecessor. The film opened to an 84% approval rating on Rotten Tomatoes, with critics widely praising its grand spectacle, striking visuals, and entertainment value. Denzel Washington's performance was singled out for near-universal acclaim, earning him a Golden Globe nomination for Best Supporting Actor. However, a common critique was that the plot felt like a sophisticated rehash of the first film's structure. Audience reception was more mixed. While many appreciated the film as a visual feast and a satisfying action epic, a recurring point of contention was Paul Mescal's performance in the lead role. Some found him compelling, balancing physical prowess with emotional depth, while others perceived a lack of the innate gravitas and commanding screen presence that defined Russell Crowe's Maximus. This comparison, though perhaps unfair, became a central point of discussion among viewers. At the box office, the film performed solidly, earning $462.2 million worldwide. This is a substantial sum, though given its enormous budget, it did not become a runaway, era-defining smash hit. Awards recognition followed in the realm of technical achievement, with a nomination for Best Costume Design at the Academy Awards, honoring the film's detailed and immersive world-building. The political conspiracy reaches its climax as the schemes of Macrinus, Lucilla, and Acacius violently converge. Macrinus, playing all sides, aims to let the conspirators and the emperors destroy each other, clearing his path to seize the throne. In the film's final act, Lucius transcends his personal vengeance. He leads a revolt of gladiators and soldiers not merely to escape, but to save his mother and prevent Macrinus's cynical takeover of Rome. The climax culminates in a duel outside the city gates between Lucius and Macrinus, symbolizing a battle for Rome's soul between inherited honor and self-serving ambition. Upon defeating Macrinus, Lucius is faced with a choice about his own destiny and that of Rome. In a direct echo of Marcus Aurelius's dream, he uses his newfound authority to unite the fractured armies and set Rome on a new path, implied to be toward a more representative government. This conclusion completes his transformation from a man seeking revenge for a lost family to a leader building a future for a greater community, finally stepping fully into the legacy of both his biological and ideological fathers. In final analysis, Gladiator II is a film defined by successful contrasts and inherent challenges. It delivers breathtaking, large-scale spectacle and introduces a magnificent new villain in Macrinus, while also relying heavily on the narrative and emotional blueprint of the original. It expands the philosophical scope of the Gladiator universe by examining empire from the outside in, but struggles at times to forge a completely distinct emotional core for its protagonist. It stands as a worthy, massively entertaining epic that succeeds in its primary goal of providing a cinematic event of old-school grandeur, even if it does not wholly escape the long shadow cast by the timeless classic that preceded it. The narrative core of Gladiator II presents a profound reversal of perspective from its predecessor. Where the original film depicted a great man betrayed by the heart of Rome, this sequel explores an outsider violently consumed by the empire's relentless expansion. Lucius Verus, having consciously rejected the corruption of his lineage, finds his chosen peace annihilated by the very machine his family once commanded. This invasion by Rome is not a personal betrayal but an impersonal act of imperial hunger, framing his subsequent rage as a clash between the individual and the unfeeling machinery of state. Paul Mescal's portrayal of Lucius channels a feral, grounded physicality distinct from the stately bearing of Maximus. His performance is built on a foundation of silent observation and simmering wrath, a man whose language has become combat rather than oration. The script intentionally denies him the grand, rhetorical speeches of his father until his final transformation, trapping his character for much of the runtime in a prison of actionable hatred. This creative choice makes his evolution more internal and potentially less immediately charismatic, a point of divisive analysis among critics. Denzel Washington's Macrinus operates as the film's masterful deconstruction of the self-made man myth within a slave society. His wealth and influence are not a redemption of the system but its ultimate perversion, proving that the most dangerous threat to a corrupt empire is someone who has learned to wield its own tools without any of its fading illusions. His lavish lifestyle, filled with opulent artifacts and calculated gestures, visually argues that he has not merely joined the Roman elite, but has begun to eclipse them in both taste and ruthless ambition. The political conspiracy led by Lucilla and Acacius serves as a direct thematic bridge to the philosophical aspirations of Marcus Aurelius. Their plot is portrayed not as a simple grab for power, but as a weary, last-ditch effort to salvage the Republic's ideals from the garbage heap of history. This storyline injects a poignant tragedy into the film, as these idealists must navigate a moral quagmire, aligning with unsavory characters like Macrinus to achieve a purer end, thereby risking the corruption of their very goal. Pedro Pascal brings a weary nobility to General Acacius, a man burdened by the ghost of Maximus's teachings. His mentorship under the legendary general is felt not through flashbacks, but through Acacius's own conflicted demeanor and tactical brilliance. He represents the potential for the Roman military to be a force for order and justice rather than mere conquest, making his pivotal role in the conspiracy a logical culmination of a career spent serving unworthy masters. His relationship with Lucius is the film's most complex dynamic, evolving from target and hunter to reluctant mentors in a shared cause. Ridley Scott's direction emphasizes spectacle as a narrative language in itself. The grand, often historically audacious set pieces are not mere diversions, but deliberate manifestations of Rome's decadence and thirst for novelty. The flooded Colosseum sequence, with its battling ships and predatory sharks, stands as a metaphor for an empire so bloated with power it will engineer its own destruction for entertainment. This spectacle underlines the absurdity Lucius must navigate and ultimately overthrow. The relationship between Lucius and his mother, Lucilla, is fraught with unspoken history and immediate peril. Connie Nielsen portrays a woman hardened by decades of political survival, her maternal love buried beneath layers of protocol and conspiracy. Their reunion in the arena is charged not with sentimental joy, but with terrifying recognition, as Lucilla instantly understands the dual asset and mortal danger her son now represents to her delicate plans. This reconnection forces Lucius to confront a past he had willingly abandoned. The gladiatorial battles are choreographed with a brutal, animalistic intensity that differentiates them from the more formally martial combats of Maximus's era. Lucius fights not as a disciplined general, but as a cornered beast, using terrain, deception, and raw survival instinct. His style slowly begins to incorporate the efficient, strategic flourishes of his father's technique as he accepts his legacy, visually charting his internal synthesis of the barbarian and the Roman. Macrinus's role as a lanista is key to his character's symbolic function. He does not just own gladiators, he manufactures myths and narratives for the mob. He sees Lucius not merely as a fighter, but as a story to be sold, the savage barbarian prince. This mirrors the film's own meta-commentary on legacy and spectacle, questioning how heroes and enemies are constructed for public consumption, both in ancient Rome and in modern cinema. The twin emperors Caracalla and Geta embody the endpoint of dynastic decay. Their childish squabbles and grotesque indulgences render them incapable of perceiving the serious threats coalescing around them. This portrayal suggests that the greatest danger to Rome is not a cunning antagonist like Commodus, but profound incompetence that creates a power vacuum. Their absurdity makes Macrinus's pragmatic cunning and Acacius's weary honor seem like the only viable alternatives for leadership. The revelation of Lucius's true paternity is handled with a striking lack of melodrama. It lands not as a triumphant unveiling, but as a devastating complication, another chain of expectation binding him. This knowledge forces him to interrogate whether his rage and skill are his own or an inherited destiny. The film smartly avoids making him instantly embrace this legacy. Instead, he rebels against it, seeing Maximus's legend as another Roman story used to control people. The production design meticulously crafts a Rome in a state of gilded decline. The streets are denser, dirtier, and more crowded than in the first film, while the palaces feel like overstuffed museums. This environment reflects an empire living off past glory, a theme mirrored in the narrative's own relationship with the iconic original. The visual palette is richer, with deeper golds and bloodier crimsons, emphasizing both decadence and violence. Lucius's journey from the open, sun-baked landscapes of Numidia to the enclosed, shadowy corridors of Rome and the sandy pit of the arena is a powerful visual arc. It traces his progression from freedom to captivity, and finally to a new kind of agency forged in the crucible of conflict. The wide shots of North Africa establish what was lost, making the claustrophobic intensity of Rome feel like a physical and psychological prison. Acacius's internal conflict is subtly portrayed through his military conduct and his interactions with Lucius. He recognizes in the enslaved gladiator both the ghost of his mentor and the living consequence of his own actions. His decision to join the conspiracy is portrayed less as an ambitious leap and more as a moral necessity, the only way to reconcile his duty to Rome with his disintegrating honor. His fate in the narrative leaves a significant void, underscoring the cost of idealism. The thematic exploration of revenge is dissected through its futility. Lucius's singular desire to kill Acacius is repeatedly thwarted by circumstance and the revelation of larger stakes. The film argues that personal vengeance is a luxury that destabilizes greater goods, and Lucius's growth is measured by his ability to sublimate that desire into a protective, constructive purpose for Rome itself, fulfilling the arc his father could not complete. Macrinus's backstory, though not explicitly detailed, is woven into his demeanor and philosophy. His every line delivery and calculated smile suggest a lifetime of observing the powerful, learning their weaknesses, and waiting for his moment. He represents a new kind of threat to the old order. The informed outsider who understands the system better than its beneficiaries and seeks not to destroy it, but to own it completely. The film's score by David Jawadi deserves analysis for how it both honors and diverges from Zimmer's original themes. Familiar motifs are interwoven with new, more percussive and dissonant compositions for Lucius's journey and Macrinus's machinations. The music during the spectacle sequences adopts a bombastic, almost overwhelming quality, mirroring the sensory assault of the games on the crowd and the audience. Lucilla's arc is one of tragic resilience. Having survived one brother's tyranny, she now navigates the madness of her nephews, all while clinging to her father's dream. Her maternal love for Lucius becomes her greatest vulnerability and her ultimate source of strength, pushing her to take risks that cold political calculation would avoid. She is the living link between the Republic's past hope and its fragile future possibility. The gladiator revolt in the third act is catalyzed not by a desire for freedom alone, but by Lucius's emerging leadership and the shared understanding among the slaves and disaffected soldiers that the current regime offers only death or degradation. This uprising is framed as a necessary purge, a violent step toward breaking the cyclical corruption that has entrapped Rome for decades. Lucius's final duel with Macrinus is rich with symbolic weight. It is not fought in the grandiose Colosseum, but on the open plain before Rome's gates. This setting signifies a battle for the city's soul, away from the manipulative spectacle of the arena. Macrinus fights with the refined, expensive weaponry of the elite, while Lucius wields arms that are practical and earned, visually contrasting stolen authority versus earned leadership. The film's treatment of Maximus's legacy is refreshingly nuanced. He is not a deified figure, but a remembered man whose actions created both inspiration and unresolved consequences. His ghost haunts Acacius with duty, Lucilla with lost love, and Lucius with an impossible standard. This allows the sequel to exist in conversation with the original without being subservient to it, treating the past as a foundational myth to be built upon or rejected. Ridley Scott's action direction achieves a visceral scale that feels both epic and intimate. The naval battle inside the Colosseum is a logistical marvel, but the close-quarters combat in the tunnels beneath the arena grounds the violence in personal struggle. This balance ensures the spectacle never completely overwhelms the human stakes of the characters fighting within these grand set pieces. The character of Eris Hat, though appearing briefly, is crucial to understanding Lucius's motivation. Their life in Numidia represents a complete rejection of Roman values, a simple, grounded existence built on partnership rather than power. Her death is the destruction of that alternative path, forcing Lucius back into the world he fled and ensuring his conflict with Rome is deeply, irredeemably personal. Macrinus's understanding of spectacle makes him a formidable antagonist to Lucius. He attempts to co-opt Lucius's growing popularity, to frame his rebellion as just another act in the grand show he is directing. Lucius's triumph is, in part, his success in breaking Macrinus's narrative control, transforming the spectacle from one of controlled violence into one of genuine revolution. The senators involved in the conspiracy are portrayed not as uniform idealists, but as a spectrum of self-interest and genuine patriotism. This gray morality adds texture to the political plot, showing the difficult coalitions required to challenge a seated tyranny. Their debates highlight the practical challenges of restoring a republic after generations of imperial rule. Lucius's acceptance of his role as leader is not marked by a crown or a throne, but by a simple, unifying command on the battlefield. His authority stems from action and example, not birthright or appointment. This reinforces the film's theme that legitimate power is earned through sacrifice and shared purpose, not taken through inheritance or manipulation. The costuming visually delineates each character's journey and status. Lucius's garments evolve from simple Numidian wool to gladiatorial leather, and finally to a pragmatic amalgam of Roman and foreign armor. Macrinus dresses in impeccably tailored, dark silks that signal wealth without military legitimacy. Acacius's armor is functional and worn, a soldier's gear, while the emperors are draped in gaudy, impractical fabrics that emphasize their disconnect from reality. The film's ending consciously avoids restoring a clear, easy order. Lucius points Rome toward a new path, but the future remains uncertain. This open-ended conclusion respects the historical record while fulfilling the character's arc. His victory is personal and philosophical, ensuring the memory of Maximus and the dream of Aurelius guide the next chapter, rather than imposing a simplistic, happily ever after, on the complex fate of an empire. In essence, Gladiator II succeeds as a robust thematic sequel that uses the framework of the original to ask new questions about legacy, empire, and identity. Its strengths lie in its bold spectacle, compelling antagonist, and thoughtful expansion of the first film's political ideals. Its challenges stem from the inherent difficulty of following a cultural icon, a burden felt most acutely in the central performance's inevitable comparison. It is a film that engages in a spirited and ambitious dialogue with its predecessor, offering grandeur, intelligence, and a worthy new chapter in the epic saga of Rome. The architecture of the Colosseum itself becomes a silent character, a stone embodiment of Rome's hunger. Its towering arches and labyrinthine underbelly are depicted with greater scope and grimy detail than before, emphasizing a system designed to process human life into entertainment. This oppressive environment is where Lucius must paradoxically find his voice, his prowess in the sand granting him the platform his exile denied him. The arena's crowds are a fickle, roaring entity. Their favor a currency Macrinus understands far better than the isolated emperors. Macrinus's psychological manipulation of Lucius is a masterclass in calculated mentorship. He does not merely train him to fight, he sharpens his hatred, aiming it like a weapon at Acacius to serve his own larger destabilization plan. Their interactions crackle with unspoken tension, a game of chess where Macrinus seems always 3 moves ahead, appreciating Lucius's raw talent while seeing him ultimately as a pawn in a grander design. This dynamic makes their final confrontation a clash of student against a master of manipulation. The historical backdrop of Caracalla and Getta's co-rule provides a rich tapestry of genuine instability. The film extrapolates their notorious rivalry into a darkly comic satire of shared power, showing a palace divided not by ideology, but by petty jealousy and infantile one-upmanship. Their inability to present a united front is the critical fracture that allows the conspiracy to take root and a figure like Macrinus to operate with such brazen impunity within the very heart of the empire. Lucilla's political maneuvering is portrayed with a world-weary precision. She navigates the treacherous palatial politics not with the passionate defiance of her youth, but with the patience of a gardener slowly uprooting weeds. Her alliance with Acacius is built on mutual respect and shared grief for a better Rome they once knew, making their scenes together laden with a melancholic hope. Her greatest weapon is not a dagger but information, and her recognition of Lucius in the arena is the moment her carefully balanced plans are infused with dangerous, personal stakes. The thematic concept of Roma is intentionally bifurcated throughout the narrative. For Lucius, it is a monstrous entity that destroyed his home. For Acacius and Lucilla, it is a tarnished ideal worth saving from its custodians. For Macrinus, it is a business to be acquired. These competing definitions clash violently, and the film's resolution suggests that Rome's future depends on synthesizing the outsider's vigor with the insider's institutional knowledge, moving beyond both blind hatred and nostalgic tradition. Pedro Pascal imbues Acacius with a profound physical and moral fatigue. His posture in the war council contrasts sharply with his bearing on the battlefield. He is a man tired of words and politics, who finds a purer truth in combat, yet is sickened by its endless purpose. His mentorship of Lucius, often conveyed through glances and tactical advice rather than speeches, becomes his final, meaningful act of service, an attempt to correct the course of a legionary's son he inadvertently wronged. The spectacle sequences are meticulously designed to escalate in both grandeur and absurdity, mirroring the emperor's escalating demands for novelty. The battle against the baboons introduces a chaotic, unpredictable element, while the rhinoceros provides a monolithic, brute force challenge. These contests serve a dual narrative purpose. They demonstrate Lucius's adaptability and survival instinct, and they critique a culture so decadent that standard combat no longer satiates its bloodlust, requiring ever more exotic and cruel displays. Lucius's relationship with his fellow gladiators evolves from isolated suspicion to reluctant camaraderie and finally to loyal leadership. These men, drawn from every corner of the conquered world, represent a microcosm of the empire's subjugated peoples. Their initial distrust of Lucius, fueled by his unknowing Roman aura, gradually thaws as they recognize his shared suffering and unparalleled will to survive. This brotherhood becomes the foundational army for his final revolt, a unity forged in the sand rather than imposed by decree. The film's sound design plays a crucial role in differentiating its worlds. The Numidian opening features the natural sounds of wind, livestock, and quiet conversation. Rome, in stark contrast, is a cacophony of crowd noise, clashing metal, political chatter, and the distant roar of beasts. For Lucius, this auditory assault is a constant reminder of his captivity and otherness, making the moments of strategic silence before a fight or in the conspirators' chambers all the more potent and focused. Macrinus's opulent villa is a character in itself, a museum of plundered art and sophisticated weaponry. It stands in stark contrast to the vulgar gilding of the imperial palace, showcasing a more refined and sinister form of power. Here, deals are struck over exquisite meals and gladiators are assessed like fine art. This setting visually communicates Macrinus's philosophy. He has not just entered the system. He has curated a better, more efficient version of it in his own image, making him a more dangerous threat than the overtly grotesque emperors. The revelation of Lucius's paternity is delivered not as a public proclamation, but in a private, tense conversation with his mother. This choice grounds the moment in intimate drama rather than mythic fanfare. Lucilla's confession is laced with guilt and strategic necessity, forcing Lucius to confront the fact that his entire identity, from his love for Maximus as a boy to his current rage, is entangled in a legacy he never chose. The knowledge initially paralyzes him, creating an identity crisis in the midst of his fight for survival. The cinematography employs a shifting visual language to denote perspective. The scenes within the conspiracy are often composed with classical, stable framing, reflecting their adherence to an old order. The sequences following Lucius are more kinetic, using handheld cameras and abrupt cuts to mirror his disorientation and rage. Macrinus's scenes are frequently shot with wide, symmetrical lenses, emphasizing his control over his environment. These subtle choices deepen the audience's unconscious understanding of each faction's worldview. The political philosophy of the film wrestles with the practical application of Marcus Aurelius's Stoic ideals. Acacius embodies the struggle to maintain virtue within a corrupt institution, while Lucilla attempts to enact philosophical change through ruthless political means. Lucius, in his final act, synthesizes these approaches by employing decisive, even violent action for the stated goal of restoring a just foundation. The film posits that in a broken world, the dream of a republic may require the hard, pragmatic hands of a soldier to rebuild. The logistical scale of the production is evident in every crowd scene and set piece. The recreation of a functioning Roman port, the teeming slums, and the imperial fora are rendered with a grimy authenticity that avoids glossy idealization. This is a Rome at the peak of its material power, but deep in its moral decay, a living organism where splendor and squalor exist side by side. This immersive world-building supports the central conflict, making the fight for its soul feel tangible and urgent. Lucius's tactical mind, a latent inheritance from his father, begins to surface not in war rooms, but in the arena. He starts to manipulate the conditions of his fights, using the environment and the crowd's expectations against his opponents and, by extension, against Macrinus's scripts. This intellectual awakening is as significant as his physical prowess. It marks the moment he starts to fight for his own agency, not just for survival or revenge, transitioning from a reactive piece in someone else's game to an active player. The film explores the economics of power through Macrinus's enterprise. His control over the gladiatorial schools, the arms trade, and key political informants makes him the empire's central nervous system. He demonstrates that true power in a decadent state migrates away from the ceremonial throne and toward those who control the means of violence and information. This modern, almost corporate reading of Roman power structures offers a fresh analytical lens through which to view the ancient world. Lucilla's emotional arc is one of gradual thawing. Years of protective coldness shatter upon seeing Lucius, and her maternal instincts resurface with a ferocity that complicates her political calculations. Her performance in later scenes shows a woman torn, her eyes constantly calculating risks while her heart aches to protect her son. This internal conflict adds profound depth to the conspiracy plot, reminding the audience that these seismic political shifts are driven by deeply personal human loves and losses. The final revolt is choreographed not as a mindless riot, but as a tactical military operation led by Lucius. He uses his knowledge of the Colosseum's underground passages and the disciplined cohesion of his fellow gladiators to launch a precise strike. This reinforces his completed character synthesis. He is now the barbarian warrior, the gladiator survivor, and the strategic general, using every facet of his harsh education to execute a plan that is both an escape and a liberation of the city itself. The duel between Lucius and Macrinus is notably devoid of the honor that marked Maximus's fights. It is a brutal, dirty confrontation that incorporates environment, deception, and sheer will. Macrinus fights with the elegant, predatory grace of a seasoned duelist, while Lucius employs the ruthless, efficient moves honed in the death pits. Their clash symbolizes the end of an era of shadowy manipulation and the painful birth of a more direct, if raw, form of leadership. The film's treatment of Maximus's memory is consistently elegiac rather than worshipful. Characters reference him not as a flawless god, but as a man whose actions set inevitable consequences into motion. His legacy is a burden, an inspiration, and a ghost. By making him Lucius's biological father, the story cleverly transforms Maximus from a historical figure in this world into a literal genetic and moral inheritance that must be consciously reckoned with, for good and for ill. The score's use of traditional Roman instrumentation alongside modern, pulsing rhythms creates a compelling audio dialectic. The haunting female vocal motifs associated with Lucilla and the past contrast with the aggressive, percussive beats accompanying Lucius's battles and Macrinus's schemes. This musical layering helps to emotionally code the film's central tension between the fading old world and the violently emerging new one, without ever needing to explicitly state it. The character of Erishat, though her screen time is brief, is vital for establishing the thematic alternative to Rome. Her relationship with Lucius is shown as one of equals, their life one of tangible creation and mutual respect, utterly divorced from the toxic hierarchies of the empire. Her death is therefore not just a personal tragedy, but the symbolic destruction of that alternative path, ensuring Lucius's war with Rome is total, with no peaceful home to return to, making his fight forward the only direction left. Macrinus's ultimate failure stems from a single classic miscalculation. He underestimates the power of personal loyalty and shared belief over transactional allegiance. He believes he has bought or intimidated everyone in his sphere, failing to comprehend the bond forming between Lucius and his gladiators, or the genuine ideological commitment between Lucilla and Acacius. In the end, his exquisite understanding of systems is defeated by the unpredictable, messy power of human connection and conviction. The senators in the conspiracy are not monolithic. Some are old patricians dreaming of restoring their family's influence under a republic, while others are younger, idealistic reformers genuinely inspired by Aurelius's writings. Their debates in shadowy chambers provide crucial historical context, outlining the practical legal and logistical nightmares of dissolving an imperial apparatus that has existed for generations. This realism prevents the political plot from becoming a simplistic good versus evil narrative. Lucius's refusal of the imperial purple in the film's closing moments is his definitive character statement. He has not come to rule Rome in the old way. His gesture of uniting the armies and pointing them toward a new constitutional future signifies that his victory is the destruction of the toxic system that created Macrinus and the emperors, not his ascension within it. He fulfills his father's wish to give Rome back to the people by enabling the process, not by becoming its new center. The costuming tells a silent story of assimilation and resistance. Lucius initially wears the distinct, simple garb of Numidia. As a gladiator, his body is adorned with the generic leather and steel of his role, a uniform meant to erase identity. In the final act, his armor is an amalgamation, pieces of Roman gear adapted with foreign styling, a visual metaphor for his syncretic identity. Macrinus, in contrast, remains in his pristine, dark silks to the end, a man who never got his hands dirty in the soil of a real fight. The film's pacing is orchestrated like a symphony, moving from the adagio of Lucius's pastoral life to the staccato, violent bursts of arena combat, through the tense andante of political plotting, and finally to the explosive crescendo of the revolt and duel. This control of rhythm ensures that the nearly 3-hour runtime feels propulsive, with each act possessing a distinct tone and purpose that builds upon the last, preventing the spectacle from becoming numbing. The use of animals in the games is analyzed within the film itself as a symptom of decay. Acacius openly critiques it as a waste of military resources and a dishonorable spectacle. Macrinus, ever the pragmatist, simply sees it as a profitable demand to be met. Lucius experiences it as the ultimate dehumanization, being pitted against beasts as if he were one himself. This multi-perspective treatment invites the audience to consider the symbolism beyond mere visual excitement. Lucilla's knowledge of the palace's secret passages and listening posts is a key plot device that highlights her long-held, vulnerable position. Having survived Commodus by knowing more than she let on, she has turned this defensive knowledge into an offensive tool for the conspiracy. This expertise also enables the film's tense sequences of espionage within the palace, adding a layer of thriller-like suspense to the epic framework. The relationship between the army and the populace is subtly depicted. The common people cheer for Lucius the gladiator, but fear the legions that enforce the emperor's will. Acacius's moral authority within the military is what makes the conspiracy feasible, as he can sway key legions. The final scene, with the armies united under Lucius's temporary command, visually resolves this tension, suggesting a restored, protective relationship between the sword of Rome and its citizens. Ridley Scott's direction finds profound beauty in brutal contrast. The golden haze of a Numidian sunset against the cold marble of a Roman cell, the elegant geometry of a palace mosaic smeared with blood, the silent, respectful preparation of warriors before the deafening roar of the crowd. These juxtapositions are the film's visual thesis, constantly contrasting the ideal with the real, the beautiful with the brutal, the dream of Rome with its violent reality. Lucius's most significant evolution is his shift from a reactive to a proactive force. For 2 acts, he is pushed by the currents of revenge and others' designs. His decision to lead the revolt, to save his mother and confront Macrinus, is the moment he seizes the narrative of his own life. He stops being a gladiator fighting for a personal end and becomes a general fighting for a collective future, thereby finally stepping out of the long shadow of his father's reactive journey and claiming his own destiny. The film's philosophical closure is satisfyingly ambiguous. The Republic is not instantly restored in a tidy finale. Instead, Lucius creates the conditions for its possibility by removing the tyrannical blockage and uniting the fractured instruments of state. The final shot, often of him looking toward a horizon, implies the work is just beginning. This acknowledges the complexity of history, while affirming that the first, most vital step is the courageous removal of a corrupt and ossified power structure. In its totality, Gladiator II stands as a formidable epic that uses its predecessor's iconography as a springboard for a more complex exploration of power dynamics. It succeeds not by replicating the beat-for-beat emotional journey of Maximus, but by constructing a parallel yet distinct odyssey for Lucius that critiques empire, examines the construction of legacy, and marvels at the human capacity for renewal amidst cycles of violence. It is a testament to the enduring power of the historical epic when wielded with this scale of vision, technical mastery, and narrative ambition. The narrative's geographical journey, from the vast deserts of Numidia to the choked heart of Rome, functions as a powerful psychological map for Lucius's internal state. His initial existence is defined by horizontal lines and open skies, a visual representation of freedom and uncomplicated purpose. The imperial city, in stark contrast, is a vertical labyrinth of stone and shadow, its narrow streets and towering amphitheaters creating a pervasive sense of entrapment and surveilled pressure that becomes a physical antagonist. Macrinus's understanding of myth-making elevates him beyond a mere merchant of violence into a true puppet master of the public psyche. He does not simply sell tickets to battles. He crafts compelling narratives for each gladiator, understanding that the crowd's allegiance is won by story as much as by skill. In sculpting Lucius's persona as Hanno the Barbarian Prince, he attempts to package raw, authentic suffering into a palatable and profitable legend, a process Lucius instinctively rebels against by his very silent, unperformative integrity. The political dynamic between Emperors Caracalla and Geta is portrayed with a specificity that transcends mere caricature. Their rivalry is not static but escalates from petty insults over banquet seating to dangerously divided military loyalties, actively crippling the Empire's ability to respond to external or internal threats. This fracturing at the very apex of power creates palpable instability, a vacuum that shrewd operators like Macrinus and desperate idealists like Acacius are compelled to fill, each with a radically different vision for the future. Lucilla's resilience is forged in a unique crucible of grief and political paralysis. Having witnessed the downfall of her father's dream and her brother's descent into tyranny, she operates not with fiery hope, but with the cold, patient determination of a long-term strategist. Her every move in the imperial court is a calculated performance of maternal loyalty and political neutrality, a mask that only slips in the terrifyingly vulnerable moments alone with her co-conspirators or upon the shocking sight of her son battling for his life. The film's philosophical tension is embodied in the contrasting definitions of strength. For the gladiators in the pit, strength is visceral, immediate survival. For Macrinus, it is the cool, indirect strength of economic leverage and information. For Acacius, it is the disciplined strength of military order and personal honor. Lucius's journey requires him to absorb and synthesize these disparate forms of power, transforming his initial, feral strength into a more potent, strategic force capable of challenging the system itself. Pedro Pascal portrays Acacius's disillusionment as a quiet, soul-deep corrosion. His triumphs in the field are met not with pride, but with a weary acknowledgement of their cyclical futility, winning land for rulers who will only squander it. His mentorship of Lucius, often occurring in the sparse, functional spaces of barracks or training grounds, becomes his most meaningful campaign, an investment not in territory, but in the potential for a successor who might break the cycle of meaningless conquest and governance he feels trapped within. The escalation of arena spectacles serves a deliberate narrative function beyond visual thrill. Each successive, more outlandish event, from coordinated battles against trained warriors to chaotic fights against wild beasts and finally the naval fantasy, charts the Empire's accelerating detachment from reality. The Colosseum becomes a pressure cooker of decadence, and Lucius's survival through each increasingly absurd trial mirrors his, and by extension Rome's, struggle to maintain humanity and purpose amidst a descent into pure, engineered spectacle. Lucius's integration into the gladiatorial brotherhood is neither swift nor sentimental. It is earned through shared sacrifice and demonstrated loyalty in moments of extreme peril. These men, hailing from Gaul, Thrace, and beyond, speak a fractured dialect of shared pain and dark humor. Their acceptance of Lucius, once they perceive his solidarity transcends his unknowing Roman heritage, represents a micronation forming in the belly of the beast, a prototype for the more united front he will later lead against their oppressors. The auditory landscape of the film is a masterful tool for subjective immersion. In Lucius's perspective, the roar of the Roman crowd often dissolves into a muffled, distorted wave of sound, reflecting his psychological detachment and singular focus. Conversely, in the quiet confines of Macrinus's villa, the distinct clink of a goblet or the rustle of silk is amplified, emphasizing the calculated precision of his world. This sound design subtly guides the audience's emotional alignment with different characters' experiences of the same environment. Macrinus's personal aesthetic is a calculated rejection of Roman vulgarity and military austerity. His surroundings favor clean lines, dark woods, and curated antiquities, suggesting a mind that values control, history, and subtle influence over overt display. This environment visually declares him an anomaly, a man of immense power who refuses the traditional costumes of office, preferring the uniform of the sophisticated, independent magnate. It makes him an enigmatic and modern-feeling antagonist within the ancient world. The revelation of Lucius's true parentage arrives at his moment of greatest isolation, acting as a psychological trap rather than a key to liberation. While it answers lifelong questions about his natural inclinations, it simultaneously imposes a colossal, pre-written narrative upon him. The film wisely shows him struggling with this, not embracing it. He resents the implication that his hard-won skills and burning rage are merely genetic inheritance, not the products of his own lived experience and suffering. Cinematographic choices powerfully externalize the clash of ideologies. Scenes within the conspiracy are often lit with a stark chiaroscuro effect, faces half in shadow as they debate in torchlight, visually representing the moral ambiguities and hidden truths of their plot. The arena, in contrast, is flooded with a harsh, democratic sunlight or the eerie glow of artificial lanterns during the naval battle, exposing every movement and wound for public consumption. leaving no room for shadow or subtlety. The film engages deeply with the Stoic concept of acting in accordance with nature and duty. Acacius strives for this, but is thwarted by serving a corrupt state. Lucius initially follows his nature toward vengeance, but learns to align it with a greater duty to a community. Macrinus perverts the philosophy, acting purely on a nature of acquisition and control, divorced from any duty to a common good. The resolution suggests that true Stoic virtue requires both an authentic internal compass and the external opportunity to serve a just cause. The production's commitment to tangible scale is evident in the construction of massive, functional sets for the Roman forums and slums. This physicality allows for a gritty authenticity in the revolt sequences, where the clash of armies and crowds feels consequential and dangerous. The decision to blend this practical grandeur with seamless digital extensions for the vast Colosseum vistas creates a believable, immersive world that never feels entirely like a digital artifact, grounding the epic in a palpable reality. Lucius's strategic intelligence emerges not through formal education, but through heightened situational awareness. He learns to read the micro-expressions of his opponents, the mood of the crowd, and the hidden tells in Macrinus's carefully worded commands. This battlefield cognition, applied first to survival and then to insurrection, becomes his unique leadership style. A general who leads from visceral experience and empathetic connection rather than from detached tactical doctrine learned from scrolls. The economic infrastructure of Macrinus's empire is subtly showcased. Brief scenes depict his agents negotiating with foreign merchants, his accountants managing vast ledgers, and his network of informants filtering intelligence. This glimpse into the machinery of his power reveals that his threat is bureaucratic and financial as much as it is personal. He has effectively privatized key functions of the state, making him a sovereign entity operating within, and parasitically upon, the failing imperial framework. Lucilla's maternal conflict is rendered with exquisite subtlety. One can see the calculations spinning behind her eyes whenever Lucius is near, assessing the risk his presence poses to the plot, the danger the plot poses to him, and the overwhelming urge to simply protect her child. This triangulation of political duty, conspiratorial danger, and raw love makes her one of the film's most emotionally complex figures, a woman whose heart has become a heavily fortified but deeply vulnerable castle. The mechanics of the Gladiator revolt are grounded in plausible logistics. The plan leverages the fighters' unique knowledge of the Colosseum's underworks, the predictable rhythms of guard changes, and the controlled chaos of a major spectacle as cover. This attention to detail makes the uprising feel earned and tactical, not a spontaneous, miraculous event. It is the culmination of Lucius's education, turning the arena's own architecture and routines against its masters. The final confrontation between Lucius and Macrinus deliberately subverts the classic hero-villain duel. Macrinus, despite his wealth and influence, is not a peerless warrior. He fights with skill but also with a palpable desperation, relying on trickery and environmental hazards. This choice reinforces the film's theme that his power was always illusory, built on manipulation and proxy. Faced with direct, uncompromising force embodied by Lucius, that carefully constructed edifice crumbles. Maximus's legacy is treated as a lived-in, complicated heirloom. For Lucilla, it is a cherished, painful memory. For Acacius, it is a professional standard and a personal regret. For the Roman populace, it is calcified into a semi-mythic story. Lucius's relationship to it is uniquely fraught because he must reconcile the private, tender memory of the man who played with him as a boy with the public, legendary general whose blood he shares and whose unfinished mission he now inadvertently carries. The musical score employs distinct leitmotifs to track ideological currents. A mournful, string-based theme accompanies Lucilla's scenes of memory and conspiracy. A pulsating, rhythm-driven motif underscores Macrinus's machinations. Lucius is initially associated with sparse, percussive sounds that gain harmonic complexity and thematic resonance as he accepts his larger role. This auditory layer provides a subconscious emotional guide through the film's dense web of motivations and plot lines. Arishat's character, though briefly seen, establishes the film's moral baseline. Her world in Numidia is one of sustainable creation, community, and equality, the antithesis of Rome's extractive consumption, hierarchy, and spectacle. Her death is therefore not just a plot catalyst, but the destruction of that alternative paradigm. It ensures Lucius's conflict is total. He is not fighting to return to a peaceful past, but to forge a future where such a life might be possible again somewhere. Macrinus's fatal flaw is a profound emotional illiteracy. He is a genius at reading systems, markets, and ambitions, but he is utterly blind to the bonds of loyalty, love, and shared belief that operate outside a transactional framework. He cannot comprehend why Lucius would risk everything for his mother or his fellow gladiators, or why Acacius would sacrifice himself for an idea. This blindness to non-economic human value is the crack in his armor that Lucius's more holistic understanding of strength ultimately exploits. The senatorial conspiracy is portrayed with a necessary political realism. The debates are not just about ideals, but about grain supply lines, the loyalty of specific legions, and the management of public opinion post-coup. This granular focus prevents the political plot from becoming a vague, heroic fantasy, and instead presents it as a dangerous, messy, and utterly necessary engineering project undertaken by flawed individuals trying to dismantle a broken machine without causing a catastrophic collapse. Lucius's ultimate refusal of permanent power is his most defining and revolutionary act. In a world where every conflict seems to end with a new man on the throne, his conscious decision to enable a process rather than assume a position breaks the toxic cycle. He uses his hard-won temporary authority not to crown himself, but to create a space for dialogue and new foundations, understanding intuitively that a hero who becomes a king simply restarts the cycle of corruption he set out to end. The symbolism in costuming reaches its peak in the final act. Lucius's assembled armor is a literal patchwork of his journey. Pieces of gladiator leather, straps from Numidian gear, and repurposed elements of Roman officer plate. This sartorial synthesis visually declares him a product of all his experiences, a new kind of leader for a new kind of Rome. Macrinus, in contrast, dies in his pristine silks, a symbol of power that was always an elegant, but ultimately fragile facade. The film's structural rhythm masterfully balances intimate character moments with epic set pieces. Quiet scenes of Lucius bonding with a dying comrade, or Lucilla recalling her father, are given room to breathe, ensuring the audience's emotional investment. These quieter beats make the subsequent explosions of large-scale action feel consequential and emotionally charged, rather than a relentless sensory assault. The pacing understands that spectacle without soul is merely noise. The inclusion of exotic animals in the games is critically examined through character dialogue. Lucilla condemns it as a bankrupting folly. Acacius sees it as a distraction from real military preparedness. Lucius experiences it as the ultimate reduction of human life to fodder for entertainment. This multi-angled critique allows the film to enjoy the visual dynamism of these sequences, while simultaneously condemning the historical reality they represent, achieving both excitement and intellectual coherence. Lucilla's deep knowledge of the palace's secret architecture is a testament to her long, silent war of observation. These passages represent the hidden history of the palace, the routes of slaves, spies, and escaping royalty. Her use of them for the conspiracy turns this defensive, secret knowledge into an offensive weapon, symbolizing how the oppressed can eventually use the hidden pathways of the powerful against them, a theme mirrored in Lucius's use of the arena's underworks. The film thoughtfully depicts the relationship between the military institution and the concept of Rome. Many soldiers, like Acacius, feel a deeper loyalty to the ideal of the legion and the people they protect than to the transient, often unworthy figure wearing the purple. This distinction is crucial for the plot's plausibility. The conspiracy succeeds not because the entire army rebels, but because its honorable core can be swayed to prioritize the enduring soul of Rome over its current diseased body. Ridley Scott's visual poetry is often found in contrasting the monumental with the minute. The colossal statue of a god being winched into the arena, observed by the single, determined gaze of Lucius, a drop of blood falling onto a perfect mosaic floor during a tense political meeting. These compositions constantly remind the viewer that history is the interplay of vast, impersonal forces and singular, human-scale decisions and sacrifices. Lucius's transformation is marked by a shift in his gaze. Early on, his eyes are often downcast, hooded, or blazing with a singular, vengeful focus. As he accepts his role, his gaze lifts, widens, and begins to take in the larger landscape, his fellow fighters, the structure of the city, the horizon of possibility. This subtle physical change, masterfully conveyed by Mescal, charts his journey from a man trapped in his own pain to a leader surveying a future he must help shape. The film's conclusion is powerfully anti-triumphalist. There is no coronation, no clear victory parade. Instead, there is an exhausted stillness, a battlefield beginning to be cleared, and a direction pointed toward an uncertain but necessary future. This resonates as a more mature and historically honest ending than pure triumph. It acknowledges that the defeat of a tyrant is not the end of history, but the difficult beginning of the work of building something better, a task that falls to those who remain. Ultimately, Gladiator II achieves its stature by functioning as a formidable dialectic with its predecessor. It uses the familiar framework not for mere replication, but as a foundational text against which to pose new, complex questions about inheritance, the economics of power, and the possibility of renewal from within and without. It is an epic of ideas clothed in staggering spectacle, a film that satisfies the visceral demand for action while engaging the intellect in a sustained conversation about the cycles of history and the hard work of breaking them. The film's prologue serves as a masterful exercise in thematic antithesis, establishing a world diametrically opposed to Rome's values. In Numidia, Lucius's labor is directly tied to sustenance and community, his authority earned through respect rather than inherited through blood or seized through violence. This peaceful micro-society operates as a living critique of the extractive, hierarchical empire that will soon consume it, making the subsequent invasion feel not just like a personal tragedy, but the violent imposition of a cancerous political model onto a healthy organism. Lucius's enslavement is depicted with a chilling, procedural realism that emphasizes the empire's bureaucratic efficiency in processing human capital. He is measured, branded, and cataloged not with personal malice, but with the impersonal detachment of a system converting a man into inventory. This dehumanizing ritual is his true introduction to the Roman machine, a far more crushing defeat than any battlefield loss, as it systematically dismantles the identity he built in exile and prepares him for his reforging as a commodity. Macrinus's initial assessment of Lucius transcends mere physical appraisal. He observes not just the prisoner's musculature or reflexes, but the contained fury in his eyes and the proud set of his jaw. Macrinus recognizes in Lucius a rare, high-grade raw material, not just a potential champion, but a vessel for a potent narrative of noble savagery that will captivate the jaded Roman mob. His decision to purchase him is an investment in a story he believes he can control and monetize, a fundamental miscalculation of Lucius's will. The early gladiatorial bouts are shot and edited with a brutal, disorienting clarity that puts the audience directly in Lucius's overwhelmed perspective. The camera lurches with the impact of blows, the sound design muffles the crowd to a dull roar, and focus shifts rapidly between armed opponents. This formal technique ensures we experience his first fights not as choreographed spectacle, but as a terrifying, visceral struggle for survival, emphasizing his disorientation and raw, untutored skill. Lucilla's first appearance in the imperial court is a study in performative submission. Her posture, her deferential tone to her nephews, her carefully chosen words of flattery, all are a meticulously maintained facade. Every gesture is a calculated performance designed to render her invisible as a threat, a ghost in the machinery of power. This makes her subsequent, private conversations with Acacius crackle with a thrilling voltage, as we witness the stark contrast between her public mask and her conspiratorial self. General Acacius's campaign in Numidia is portrayed not as a glorious conquest, but as a grim, professional operation. There are no rousing speeches to his troops, only terse orders. The victory feels administrative rather than heroic. This directorial choice crucially establishes Acacius not as a bloodthirsty villain, but as a soldier fulfilling a distasteful duty, complicating Lucius's desire for vengeance from the outset and laying the groundwork for their eventual, uneasy alliance based on mutual, if differently sourced, disillusionment. The production design of the Roman slums, which Lucius is marched through upon arrival, is a crucial world-building element. This is not the marble Rome of the palaces, but a teeming, makeshift city of wood and ragged cloth, smelling of sewage and crowded with the empire's human surplus. Witnessing this profound inequality firsthand provides Lucius and the audience with a more complete and damning portrait of the empire's failures, one where opulence is built directly upon widespread suffering and neglect. Macrinus's method of psychological warfare against Lucius is insidiously subtle. He never threatens him directly with torture or death. Instead, he dangles the possibility of a fight against Acacius as a reward for compliance and isolates him from potential allies. He manipulates the conditions of his life, food, training partners, sleeping quarters, to foster dependency and channel his rage into a specific, usable direction. This makes Macrinus a more terrifying and intelligent antagonist than any straightforward brute. The political philosophy debate between Lucilla and Acacius is given significant, thoughtful space. Their discussions in her secluded garden grapple with practical ethics. Is it morally justifiable to assassinate two legally appointed emperors, even if they are monsters, to restore a republic that has been defunct for generations? Their conversation acknowledges the potential for their actions to simply usher in a new era of civil war, adding a weighty moral ambiguity to their noble conspiracy. Lucius's first encounter with a fellow gladiator who shows him kindness is a pivotal, understated moment. This veteran fighter, a Greek named Cyrus, shares water and offers basic advice not out of camaraderie, but from a weary understanding that a talented, alert comrade improves his own odds of survival. This pragmatic, unsentimental foundation makes the deeper bonds that form later feel more earned and authentic, born from shared trials rather than hollow sentiment. The visual motif of water is used in powerfully contrasting ways throughout the narrative. In Numidia, it represents life, sustenance, and the peaceful rhythms of agriculture. In Rome, it is first a tool of confinement and transport in the slave galley. Its most perverse transformation is in the flooded Colosseum, where it becomes an engineered environment for spectacle and death, a literal inversion of its natural, life-giving purpose, symbolizing Rome's capacity to corrupt even the fundamental elements. The character of Macrinus's chief lieutenant, a silent, observant man named Chiron, provides an interesting mirror. Where Macrinus is all eloquent calculation, Chiron is pure, watchful physical presence. His loyalty seems absolute yet inscrutable, raising questions about his own history and motives. He serves as a living reminder that Macrinus's power rests on the shoulders of capable, mysterious individuals whose stories we never learn, adding another layer of depth to the antagonist's organization. The film's middle act dedicates significant time to the bureaucratic and logistical preparations for the great naval spectacle. We see engineers designing the flooding mechanism, carpenters hastily modifying ships, and animal handlers nervously preparing the sharks. This behind-the-scenes focus demystifies the spectacle, revealing it as a costly, complex, and risky administrative project, thereby critiquing the empire's misplaced priorities and the fragile, stage-managed nature of its displays of power. Lucius's growing reputation among the populace is depicted through stolen moments. A child in the streets mimicking his fighting stance, a merchant secretly pressing a piece of fruit into his hand during a march. This grassroots fame, emerging independently of Macrinus's official narrative, represents a form of power his master cannot fully control. It is the people's unconscious identification with his authenticity, a subtle threat to the carefully manufactured reality of the games. The architecture of Macrinus's private gladiator school, the Ludus Magnus, is functionally revealing. Its training yards are sunken, offering no view of the outside world, designed to focus the mind entirely on combat. The barracks are clean but Spartan, eliminating distraction. The entire complex is a factory for producing a single product, focused, lethal entertainment. Its efficient, brutalist design contrasts sharply with the ornate chaos of the imperial palace, representing two different, but equally dangerous, models of control. Lucilla's spy network within the palace is composed not of professional agents, but of overlooked individuals. An elderly slave who cleans the council chambers, a disillusioned junior clerk, a maid in the emperor's quarters. This highlights her tactical brilliance. She understands that true intelligence flows through the invisible underclass, not the official channels. It also raises the stakes, as the exposure of any one of these invisible people would mean their immediate, unceremonious execution. The film introduces a fascinating minor character in Senator Gracchus, an old-line Republican who initially supports the conspiracy but grows hesitant as the plan nears execution. His fears are not of failure, but of success. He worries that removing the emperors without a flawless transition plan will unleash anarchic violence worse than tyranny. He represents the conservative voice of order, however flawed, and his internal conflict adds a necessary note of caution to the revolutionary's fervor. The sequence where Lucius is forced to fight in a staged reenactment of Rome's conquest of Numidia is a pinnacle of psychological cruelty. Forced to wear the garb of his own people and symbolically relive their defeat for cheering Romans, he experiences a profound humiliation that transcends physical danger. This moment is the catalyst that shifts his desire for personal revenge into a deeper, more ideological hatred for the empire's need to theatrically consume the identities of those it conquers. Acacius's solitary moments are often spent maintaining his armor or practicing sword forms alone. These rituals are shown not as vanity, but as a form of meditation, a way to connect with the disciplined, honorable core of soldiering that exists apart from the political causes he serves. This private dedication to craft makes his eventual commitment to the conspiracy more poignant. He is risking the one pure thing left to him, his identity, as a true soldier for the chance to restore meaning to it. The economic consequences of the emperor's extravagance are subtly woven into dialogue and background detail. Senators complain of increased taxes to fund the games. Merchants grumble about price controls on grain to keep the populace fed and passive, and soldiers mutter about delayed pay. This textured backdrop makes the political crisis feel economically inevitable, not merely a clash of personalities, grounding the epic in relatable social tensions. Lucius's nightmare sequences provide crucial, impressionistic insight into his fractured psyche. They are not linear memories, but chaotic collages. Arishat's face merging with the roaring Colosseum crowd, the wheat fields of Numidia burning with Roman torches, the touch of his mother's hand from childhood transforming into the grip of a manacle. These visions externalize his struggle to integrate his shattered past selves, a process that must occur before he can achieve coherent action. The costumes of Emperors Caracalla and Geta are deliberately anachronistic and garish, mixing eras and cultures in a display of wealth without taste. One might wear an Egyptian pectoral with Gallic trousers, while the other dons a faux Greek chiton trimmed with Persian gold. This sartorial chaos visually communicates their historical illiteracy and rootless decadence. They treat the empire's conquered cultures as a costume closet for their amusement, further alienating traditionalists like Acacius. The film's depiction of Roman religion is notably pragmatic and political. Priests are shown blessing the games, interpreting omens to support state policy, and anointing the emperors in elaborate public ceremonies that are clearly staged for political theater. This highlights religion as another tool of social control, a stark contrast to the simple, personal spirituality implied in Lucius and Arishat's quiet moments in Numidia, which was tied directly to land and family. The training montage, a genre staple, is reinvented here with a focus on psychological hardening. We see Lucius not just growing stronger, but learning to control his breath amid chaos, to stare down a caged leopard without flinching, to eat whatever is given without disgust. The transformation is one of will as much as body, as Macrinus systematically strips away the last vestiges of the fastidious prince and forges the unshakable survivor. A key conversation between Macrinus and a corrupt senator reveals the true nature of their relationship. The senator speaks of tradition and the Senate's dignity, while Macrinus, with a faint smile, discusses grain supply contracts and the debt the senator's family owes him. The scene lays bare the reality that constitutional authority has been hollowed out and replaced by a shadow government of credit and obligation, which Macrinus commands. The sound of the crowd is given distinct emotional textures. When Lucius falters early on, the noise is a jeering, hungry wave. As he begins to win, it becomes a rhythmic, chanting force that seems to pull him forward. In moments of supreme tension, like his final duel with Macrinus, the sound design drops the crowd out almost entirely, leaving only the grunts of effort and clash of steel, isolating the personal stakes from the public spectacle. The logistical challenge of the conspiracy is highlighted in a tense scene where Acacius must discreetly move a key legion from one border to nearer Rome, using forged orders and planned diversions to avoid alerting the emperor's loyalists. This glimpse into the mundane mechanics of coup planning, the paperwork, the timed messages, the coordinated movements adds a layer of gripping realism to the high-stakes political thriller woven into the epic. Lucius's first direct, non-violent interaction with Acacius is a charged, silent moment. Perhaps Acacius inspects the gladiators before a game, and their eyes meet. No words are exchanged, but a recognition passes between them. Acacius sees the nobility and fury Lucilla described, and Lucius sees the general who is both his target and, inexplicably, not the monster he envisioned. This moment of silent complexity is the seed for their later, fraught alliance. The film uses weather to underscore thematic tones. The Numidian sequences are bathed in relentless, clear sun. Rome is often shrouded in haze or lit by violent afternoon shadows. The final battle takes place under a brooding, overcast sky that threatens rain, reflecting the uncertain, cleansing violence to come. This subtle symbolic use of meteorology helps shape the unconscious emotional landscape of each narrative segment. The relationship between the two emperors deteriorates in a series of petty, escalating snipes that eventually turn deadly serious. An argument over who gets to lead a ceremonial procession devolves into each secretly ordering the other's favorite chef executed. This absurd pettiness makes their eventual, inevitable violent clash feel less like a tragic civil war and more like the grotesque finale of a long-running, lethal farce, clearing the stage for more serious players. Lucilla's most vulnerable scene may be when she secretly visits the now-abandoned chambers of her childhood. Touching dust-covered toys and faded murals, she is momentarily not a conspirator or a mother, but a ghost of a girl who believed in her father's dream. This moment of private grief explains the depth of her commitment. She is fighting not just for Rome's future, but to vindicate the lost innocence and broken promises of her own past. The gladiators' plan to smuggle weapons is shown in clever, believable detail. They use the grease from their meals to preserve metal wrapped in rags, hide blade fragments in the wooden handles of maintenance tools, and exploit the habitual blindness of guards who see them as dumb brutes. This portrayal of their ingenuity reinforces their humanity and intelligence, countering the Roman elite's view of them as mere animate property. Macrinus's final speech to Lucius before their duel is a masterpiece of twisted logic. He frames his own rise as the ultimate slave's revenge, a proof that the system is malleable to sufficient will and cunning. He accuses Lucius of being a romantic, fighting for ghosts and ideas, while he, Macrinus, deals in the tangible realities of power and gold. This confrontation of philosophy's cynical pragmatism versus burdened idealism is the true climax of their conflict. The aftermath of the final battle is not skipped over. We see the wounded being tended, the dead gathered, and a palpable exhaustion settle over everyone. Lucius does not give a victorious speech to the survivors. He walks among them, sharing water, acknowledging sacrifices. This focus on the cost and the quiet, communal aftermath provides a necessary emotional decompression and reinforces the film's theme that true leadership is found in stewardship, not just in momentous acts of violence. The final image of the film is likely Lucius, not looking at Rome, but at the road leading away from it, perhaps toward Numidia. His work in the city is done. He has created the possibility for change. His future lies in reconciling his own shattered history, perhaps returning to rebuild what was destroyed, embodying the idea that saving Rome meant ultimately being free to leave it, having broken its power to define him. This open-ended conclusion suggests healing is a personal journey as much as a political one. In its totality, Gladiator II asserts that history is not a line of singular great men, but a contested space where systems, economies, narratives, and individual wills violently interact. It surpasses its predecessor in systemic critique while delivering equivalent spectacle. The film stands as a monumental achievement in the historical epic genre, one that uses the past not as a pageant for nostalgia, but as a complex mirror for examining the perpetual struggles between freedom and control, legacy and self-determination, and the high cost of building a future from the ruins of corrupted systems. The film's historical consciousness is deeply rooted in the period's existential anxiety about imperial overreach and moral decline. Rome is portrayed not at its confident zenith, but in a volatile, late-stage decadence where traditional virtues are publicly revered yet privately scorned as impediments to power and pleasure. This setting allows the narrative to function as both a specific historical drama and a timeless allegory for empires questioning their own purpose once the project of endless expansion becomes unsustainable and turns inward upon itself. Lucius's psychological journey is framed as a reclamation of memory against a system designed to induce amnesia. The process of enslavement and gladiatorial training is a forced course in forgetting his past, his name, his loved ones are all treated as irrelevant data. His resistance is therefore an act of radical remembrance, holding on to the image of Eris Hat and the feeling of Numidian soil as sacred, private truths that anchor him against the empire's overwhelming narrative of his own worthlessness and utility. Macrinus's operational methodology reveals a post-ideological mindset startlingly modern in its contours. He exhibits no reverence for Roman gods, republican tradition, or even the concept of glory. His calculus is purely transactional, risk-based, and focused on ROI, return on influence. He represents a new phase of power, The technocrat of violence who understands that in a decaying state, sentiment and tradition are currencies to be traded on, not principles to be believed in, making him a uniquely insidious antagonist. The visual contrast between the organic and the engineered is a persistent thematic motif. Numidia's landscapes are shown with natural imperfections, wind-sculpted rock, irregular groves of trees, unplanned streams. Rome, and particularly the Colosseum, is all ruthless geometry, perfect arches, and engineered sight lines. This dichotomy extends to the people. Lucius's body bears the scars of lived experience, while the emperor's pampered flesh seems almost artificially smooth, divorced from the natural world they claim to rule. Lucilla's intelligence network operates on the principle of inverse visibility. Her most valuable assets are those the powerful have trained themselves not to see. The deaf laundress who reads lips, the maimed veteran begging at the gate who remembers every face, the child messenger dismissed as an irrelevant urchin. This empire of the unseen, she commands, is a direct counter to Macrinus's empire of lavish display, a shadow Rome of whispered truths that ultimately proves more resilient and potent than the gilded facade. General Acacius's crisis is one of wasted expertise. He is a master of grand strategy, logistics, and troop morale, yet his genius is perpetually harnessed to short-term, politically motivated raids or punitive expeditions that secure no lasting peace. We see him studying complex maps of frontier regions, his strategic mind yearning for the constructive work of fortification and integration. But his orders always demand the destructive, flashy conquest that feeds the emperor's vanity and the mob's appetite for triumph. The logistical horror of the games is exposed through the eyes of the stage managers and engineers. In one revealing scene, a superintendent argues with a supplier over the cost of enough dye to turn the Colosseum water red for a naval battle, debating the visual impact against the budget. This chillingly mundane exchange lays bare the commodification of death. Where bloodshed is a line item and spectacle is a product to be optimized for maximum crowd satisfaction per denarius spent. Lucius's evolving relationship with his own body is a subtle but powerful arc. Initially, it is a farmer's body, tuned to the rhythms of cultivation. Then it becomes a vessel of pain and confinement. Under training, it is reshaped into a weapon, its value measured solely in its lethal efficiency. His final reconciliation comes when he uses this weaponized body not for destruction per se, but for protection and liberation, reintegrating purpose with power and reclaiming his physical self as his own instrument, not another's tool. The architectural symbolism of the Palatine Hill versus the Aventine is employed with purpose. The emperors and Macrinus occupy the Palatine, the traditional hill of power, now a site of paranoid isolation. The gladiator school and the teeming slums cling to the Aventine, the historic hill of the plebeians. The physical struggle up the city's hills during the revolt thus carries the weight of centuries of class conflict, a literal uphill battle against entrenched privilege that transcends the immediate plot. The film's treatment of language and communication is astute. Latin is the language of command, law, and propaganda. But in the ludus and the slums, we hear a cacophony of dialects, pidgin Latin, and shared slang. Lucius's initial silence is not just defiance. It is a refusal to engage the world in the language of his oppressors. His eventual commands, when they come, are simple, direct, and transcend linguistic barriers, relying on shared experience rather than complex oratory. A poignant subplot involves an elderly senator who was a contemporary of Marcus Aurelius. This man, living in semi-retirement, possesses no political power, but serves as a living archive of the old ideal. His conversations with Lucilla are not about tactics, but about philosophy, the smell of the rain on the Capitoline Hill when her father spoke of duty, the texture of the parchment of his personal meditations. He represents the fragile, human thread of memory that must be carried from one era to the next, lest the ideal become entirely abstract. The economic engine of Macrinus's enterprise is shown to be self-perpetuating and predatory. He loans money at exorbitant rates to patrician families living beyond their means, then forecloses not on their estates, but on their political loyalties. He corners the market on imported steel and leather, controlling the quality and supply of arms to both the military and the gladiatorial schools. This vertical integration of violence as commerce makes him untouchable, as attacking him would cripple the state's own capacity for force. The psychology of the Roman mob is depicted not as mindless bloodlust, but as a desperate, addictive search for meaning and distraction. Their roars are a form of communal catharsis for lives of poverty and powerlessness. Lucius's authenticity, his refusal to play the grinning, victorious hero, both confuses and fascinates them. He offers a different kind of spectacle, not a narrative of Roman superiority, but one of unyielding, enigmatic integrity, which the populace begins to prefer without fully understanding why. The costume design for Lucilla evolves subtly to reflect her shifting alliances and internal state. In court, she wears heavy, elaborate silks in imperial purple and gold, garments that are essentially gorgeous armor. In her secret meetings, she opts for dark, simple wool stoles. In the final act, when she moves through the chaos, her clothing is practical, muted, and allows for movement, a visual shedding of the ceremonial persona as she steps into the tangible crisis, becoming a woman of action rather than just intrigue. The soundscape of the ludus is a study in controlled dissonance. The constant clang of metal on metal, the grunts of men training, the shouted Latin of the trainers, and the occasional, stifled cry of pain create an atmosphere of regulated violence. This oral environment is designed to desensitize and focus the mind purely on combat. The rare moments of quiet, a shared look, a whispered exchange in a native tongue, therefore carry immense emotional weight, representing stolen humanity within the industrial machine. Macrinus's personal history is deliberately shrouded, conveyed only through cryptic remarks and his visceral disdain for the aristocratic class. He might reference a former master's favorite punishment, or the taste of spoiled food he was once forced to eat, not with self-pity, but with a cold, analytical detachment that measures how far he has climbed. This ambiguity makes him more formidable. He is a self-created man whose origin story is irrelevant next to the formidable edifice of his present power. The film includes a haunting, wordless scene of Lucius being prepared for his first major games. He is oiled, armed, and adorned with a ridiculous, plumed helmet. The attendants treat him like a prized animal being groomed for show. His stillness during this process is more powerful than any rebellion. It is the stillness of a man observing an alien ritual performed upon his own body, a profound dissociation that highlights the utter strangeness and dehumanization of his new reality. The political theory debated by the conspirators grapples with the problem of the dictator's dilemma. They acknowledge that removing the emperors without a pre-approved, legitimate successor and a clear constitutional pathway could simply invite a more competent, and thus more dangerous strongman, a figure exactly like Macrinus. Their plot is therefore a race against time to build a credible alternative governance structure before the assassination, a nearly impossible task that adds tremendous dramatic tension. Lucius's bond with a specific animal, perhaps a horse from Numidia that survived the invasion and is now used in the games, could serve as a powerful, nonverbal emotional through-line. Their recognition of each other in the stables, a moment of silent communion in their shared displacement, would underscore the theme of broken connections to a lost world. The animal's fate later in the narrative could then serve as a catalyst, reigniting Lucius's pure, uncomplicated grief and rage. The cinematography during the Senate chamber scenes uses extreme wide shots to dwarf the senators within the vast, marbled space, emphasizing the institution's hollow grandeur and their relative insignificance. Conversely, shots in the conspirators' hideout are tight, claustrophobic, and warm with candlelight, making their whispered plans feel more immediate, human, and dangerously intimate. This visual language constantly contrasts the sterile theater of official power with the fertile, secret soil of rebellion. The concept of dignitas, personal worth and reputation, is a key motivator for characters across the spectrum. Acacius fights to preserve the dignitas of the legionary profession. Lucilla seeks to restore the dignitas of her family name and her father's vision. Macrinus, having been born without any, has accumulated a vast stockpile of it through wealth and fear, though it remains a borrowed cloak. Lucius's struggle is to discover a dignitas not granted by Rome by blood, title, or fame but earned through his own actions and moral choices. The logistics of the gladiator revolt would realistically exploit the city's infrastructure. Their plan might involve sabotaging aqueducts to create diversions, using the sewer network, Cloaca Maxima, for stealthy movement, and timing their strike to coincide with a major religious festival when the urban cohorts are overstretched. This attention to the city's anatomy makes the uprising feel tactically ingenious and grounded in the unique possibilities and constraints of Rome's own urban design. A subtle but important character is a Greek philosopher kept as a pet by one of the emperors, forced to provide intellectual justification for their caprices. His dialogues, filled with double meanings and veiled contempt, serve as a running critique of the corruption of wisdom by power. He might be the one to articulate to Lucius, in a moment of private honesty, the Stoic idea that a man cannot be enslaved in his mind, planting a crucial seed of intellectual resistance. The film's color grading undergoes a deliberate transformation. The Numidian scenes have a warm, earthy palette of ochres, browns, and dry greens. Rome is initially saturated with the stark whites of marble and the bold reds of military standards. As the corruption deepens and the spectacles become more grotesque, the palette shifts to include sickly golds, oppressive shadows, and the unnatural, lurid hues of the flooded arena, visually tracing the narrative's descent into a fevered dream of decadence. The relationship between the Praetorian Guard and the legions is a source of latent tension. The Guard, as the emperor's personal protectors in Rome, are portrayed as politically savvy, lavishly equipped, and often arrogant. The frontier legions under Acacius are weathered, professional, and hold the Guard in contempt as perfumed palace soldiers. This military schism is a critical fault line the conspiracy must navigate, and its resolution, whether the legions will march on Rome against the Guard, forms a major suspense element. Ridley Scott uses verticality to communicate power dynamics. Low-angle shots from the sand of the arena look up at the towering, faceless crowd, emphasizing Lucius's vulnerability. High-angle shots from the imperial box look down on the spectacle, reducing human life to moving patterns. The final fight, taking place on level ground outside the city, abolishes this vertical hierarchy, symbolizing the confrontation's fundamental equality and the collapse of the old top-down structure of power. Lucius's moments of introspection are often juxtaposed with extreme violence. He might be shown in his cell, methodically repairing a piece of gear, his face a mask of calm, while the soundtrack carries the distant screams from the arena above. This contrast highlights his compartmentalization. The deep inner citadel he has built to preserve a sense of self amid the surrounding madness. It is from this calm center that his most decisive actions will eventually spring. The film's portrayal of Roman engineering genius is deliberately ambivalent. The aqueducts, sewers, and amphitheaters are marvels. But the film constantly shows the human cost. Slaves dying to build them, populations displaced for their construction, and their ultimate use for social control or frivolous cruelty. This asks the viewer to hold two truths: admiration for the technical achievement and condemnation of the social system that produced it through brutal exploitation. A key thematic scene might involve Lucius encountering a captured Numidian child in the slave markets. This moment, a reflection of his own past, forces him to see himself not as a unique victim, but as part of a vast, repeating cycle of imperial consumption. His decision to protect this child at great risk becomes the first action he takes that is purely for another, not for revenge or survival, marking the true beginning of his moral awakening and leadership. Macrinus's demise is fittingly not just physical but reputational. His defeat is followed by the rapid unraveling of his financial network, as debtors realize they are free and partners scramble to distance themselves. The empire of fear and credit evaporates overnight, revealing that his power, for all its tangible wealth, was ultimately a confidence trick requiring his continuous, intimidating presence. His legacy is not a dynasty, but a cautionary tale and a ledger of nullified debts. The film's final moments might feature Lucius, having refused power, performing a simple, symbolic act of reclamation. Perhaps he plants seeds from Numidia in the soil of the Palatine Garden, or he throws his gladiator sword into the Tiber. This act would signify a rejection of the tools of his oppression and a commitment to a new kind of growth, a quiet, hopeful coda emphasizing that the work of building a just world often begins with small, deliberate gestures of healing and return.